welcome back to the Cornelius Seed Podcast. Right now, we're actually going to do a buddy seat series. So I'm going to I'm going to hop in with Craig Allaman, our lead agronomist, and we're going through, and he's going to go through and get his corn in the ground. His son is going and planting beans right now. Right after this, I'm going to go over there and get some drone shots. But we're going to talk about some seedling diseases. Not really seedling diseases in particular, specific ones, but more around why it matters and why we want to dig up some plants when they emerge, if they look stunted, and what you can do about it. So stick around and check it out. You know, one of the things that folks are out here planting now, they've been going and taking advantage of some beautiful windows. So it sounds like I'm thinking I have quite a bit of acres are going to make it into the ground this week. Have been making it in majorly. I'm guessing we'll be ahead of where we were last year for progress rate, right? So
yeah,
it seems to
depending on what the rains predicted. You know, we had rain come through this morning, and this really didn't knock us out more than an hour or so.
So we beat the drum on getting that perfect stand. And you've mentioned this before, that the equipment companies have done a very good job also making people feel that there's that, right? But there's still that component of that seedling disease.
Yeah.
And there's things that, whether it's going at the too cold soils or too wet or whatever it is. So,
yep.
So you know, with that being prefaced there, everybody wants that perfect stand.
Yep.
And some people say, I've got everything dialed in. It should have been perfect. Seed depth's been consistent across the board. Why isn't it? And that's kind of the first thing is, what would be some of those things?
Yeah, it's it. So to explain what I mean by the equipment manufacturers, and they've done a great job of this, as they should. Their job is to sell equipment, but they have made it kind of, they've given people that mindset that if you have a corn plant that comes up several days later than its neighbors, that there's something wrong with your planter. You know, you need to get your units gone over, upgrade to this, that, whatever. And there's truth to that. I mean, we want to do as good a job as we possibly can of placing that seed very evenly in a consistent environment down there, consistent moisture, and get it to emerge as close to together as we can. But just because the plant doesn't come up at the same time as the neighbors around it doesn't mean you have an equipment issue necessarily. And I would argue that actually a lot of times, more times than not, you don't have an equipment issue there, especially as good as the equipment is today, and as good a job as we do of making sure that our equipment is ready, which we all try to do that as farmers. But you're probably, more times than not, fighting some type of a soil-borne disease, seedling disease. And, you know, that's why we use as premium of a seed treatment as we can get. And we're 100% today. I think Syngenta they've got it going on in the seed treatment business. They just do. They're the company that's bringing out the most actives, putting the most research into it, and we think they have the best products on the market. I hope that changes someday, because we always, as independent, you know, us of all people know that competition is really important. And so, you know, we want Corteva to be bringing out new stuff. We want Bayer to be bringing out new stuff. But right now, Syngenta's got it going. And so we use their stuff on all of our seed, while we actively look for, you know, new products that are going to be an improvement. But that's what we're doing with a premium seed treatment, is we're trying to control these soil-borne fungal diseases like Rhizoctonia, Fusarium, Penicillium, and corn. You know, those are our Pythium. You know, those are our main pathogens that will infect that seed. And so as soon as we stick it in the ground, which we're doing today, we have stuck that in an environment that can be very harsh and very dangerous. So the way we get around that is we protect it with a good seed treatment. there's a bunch of these microbes in this tune-up plus pail that are going to have activity on, their biological products and have activity on bad biological products like the Pythium and the Fusarium. Okay, so we're doing our best there. The thing that as farmers that we can do to control or help to control that is stick this seed in as good of an environment as we possibly can, and that is going to be to stick it in warmer soils. Okay, these most of these pathogens are more active in cool, wet soils. And so not only that, they'll infect that plant worse there, but if you get cool, wet conditions, that plant's not going to grow very fast. So we want to blow out of the ground if we can, and basically outgrow those soil-borne diseases. Get those first nodal roots established. So if they've attacked our primary root system, our mesocotyl that's attaching the seed to the crown, until about V3, that's what's feeding the plant before those nodal roots take over. So we want to get out of the ground and get to that stage, as quickly as we can. So that's why when it's going to be cold and wet in the forecast, we try to stay out of the field, and then right now the conditions are just tremendous. That's why you see so many planters in the field. We're above 50 degrees and rising, and it looks like we're going to stay that way for a little while in this area. It depends on where you're at, of course.
Yep.
So that's long answer to what your question was. Is that's you're sticking these products in an environment that's these pathogens are trying to survive, and they feed on our seed that we're sticking in the ground to do that.
So it's kind of interesting because they're pathogens, biologicals in a way, but they're not all created equal, right? Because Pythium in this particular case, right, it's gonna excel in cold, wet soils, not so much when it changes.
Yep.
At the same side of that, and this is kind of a question and statement because I don't know, are the pathogen the bacteria that is in the pails, is it safe saying that those perform better, like you said, in these conditions, and like the warmer ones as opposed to cold?
And some of the bad pathogens, are more active when it's warm and moist. So Pythium in soybeans can be pretty active, well, cold and moist or warm and moist.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of the good stuff in these pails are bacteria, and we always think of bacteria being bad,
Yep.
But not all bacteria is bad. A lot of these bacteria in the pails are harvesting nutrients in the soil, taking them actually in the roots of the plant where the cells extract those nutrients out, and then spew them back out, and that cycle goes over and over again. And with nitrogen and P, where they have this good bacteria in the soil, we're getting about 40% more nitrogen or phosphorus. But with potassium, it's like 100 to 200% more when we have these good bacteria in the soil, which are naturally occurring, by the way, in our soils. We're just adding some different strains and adding extra with these pails to get some extra activity there, But it's like you take probiotics. A lot of times you're putting good bacteria in your gut, and so it's kind of the same thing with this stuff we're putting in the soil.
Probiotic for our seed, or for the soil that's our seed is going into, right? Yep. It's all about the environment, and
it's a pretty good comparison, yeah.
Yeah, and then you hear this, you've done this in meetings, and it's university studies. It's always about that disease triangle, right? And that's not just applicable to foliar diseases, fungal diseases. I mean, it's the seedling diseases, the same thing, your same triangle.
Yeah, so the disease triangle, you got to have a pathogen, which let's just take that Fusarium. That's let's just take Pythium. That's probably our number one soil-borne fungal disease in corn. It's a fungus. And so that's your pathogen. And you got to have the host, or the corn seed, and then corn plant that we're sticking in the ground right now as our host. And then you got to have the right environment. So, you know, cool, wet in the soil is going to be the right environment for that pathogen to get going. Well, it's always going to be cool, wet down in the soil when we're planting in April, you know. So just, and Pythium, Fusarium, Rhizoctonia, they're all going to be there in the soil naturally. They've been there forever. They're going to be there forever. So we know we're going to have to fight that every year, that disease. And again, we're doing that with seed treatments. We're doing that with some of the biologicals now in these pails, and we're trying to do what we can do to help them out, planting them into nice warm environments where they get up out of the ground quick and basically outgrow those diseases. Because you could get attacked by Pythium, you know, early enough on to where that seedling doesn't even come out of the ground. You know, all the way up to injured seedlings that may just put on a nubbin ear or not even put an ear on because they were compromised so much early on in the growing season.
So, no, well, thank you for that. We talked about, you know, if there's seedling issues, that's going to translate to poor emergence, and then likely with it being further behind, it's just kind of behind period, lower yield and everything.
Yeah.
So, when does a guy check? When you're out here scouting, what kind of timeline are you expecting to see? What do I look for, and what can you even do about it? I guess is my thing. I said, like, if you see something attacking it now, is there anything that can be done?
If you're going to get attacked by these soil-borne seedling diseases, there's nothing you can do about them. It is what it is at that point, and that's why you use the preventative measures that we just talked about. But it is good. It's always good to be scouting those fields. So anywhere from emergence to knee-high corn, I'm really looking at what kind of issues do we have from these seedling diseases, or it could be planting errors, could be residue has messed with our planting, with our seed placement. So there's a lot of things that you can learn. It's still a valuable time to scout, but you find that plant that's clearly a leaf stage or two behind its neighbors, or 8 inches shorter or whatever. I'm going to want to dig that up and see what the roots look like, and you'll be able to tell the roots should be nice and white, healthy roots. So if you have browning on the roots, you've got some kind of issue going on. Now that could be, you got to look carefully, because you could have an insect issue. You could have white grubs or grape claspus or something feeding on the mesocotyle, or maybe ate all the root hairs off or something like that. Or you could have a seedling disease that's made the roots discolored. It'd be a nice kind of darker brown color if you see that. So at least you can see what you got going on out there. Do I need to do something different, something better for next year?
So in the whole, you're not doing it for hobby. You're doing it for livelihood. You're taking notes and you're prepping for next year, right? That's interesting, right? Because sometimes I always forget your line, but something about the sense of the past haunt the something in the future or whatever, isn't it?
Yeah, and so you pay all year long for the sins of during planting. That's one thing. And there's, we do the best job we can, and then it's in God's hands what our crop is going to turn out like. So we control what we can control, and then after that, it's just you're observing, maybe what you can do better next year.
That makes sense. Then you go through and.
But that's why we don't plant under known poor soil conditions. That's in our control. It's really hard to wait when the calendar says it's time to go. But if you're planting into, for sure, sub 40-degree soils with anything, some of those seeds ain't going to come out of the ground. You're going to get imbibitional chilling, or if the forecast, maybe the forecast is going to be turning out cold after you plant. Maybe the crop comes out of the ground, but then you get cold entry before it emerges. And imbibitional chilling, that seedling, that embryo, once it germinates, it's naturally going to that process, the cells are going to be the cell walls are going to be stretched, and they're going to have to be repaired. And the plant naturally does that under nice warm conditions. If it's too cold, it's not going to be able to do that. The cells are just going to rupture. And you may have a swollen up seed that the radicle, the initial root system never even comes out of the seed. Wow, because it's been killed through inhibitional chilling. So that's just in our control. Something that we need to not do.
Have you seen, so like, let's say your soil has been holding up 50 over for a couple days. Does it historically, and this might be getting too deep into that part, is there something like a 20-degree weather swing overnight that would really mess with your soil temps?
So what you're looking for there with soybeans, University of Nebraska, I think, had a really good study on this, the one I follow. And if you put your soybeans in the ground in decent conditions, so let's just say 50 and above. That's the one we always use to be safe. Now, you can play around down in the 40s, with soil temperatures and be okay. We've proven that. But if you really want to be safe, say 50. So if you put your beans in the ground there, and your soil temperatures don't dip down for at least 8 hours, you're going to have at least like a 75% rate of the beans emerging. Okay. Wow. And you say, 75, we just talked about corn. We lost 3,000 plants to the acre. We're worried about that. Well, it's the difference between corn and beans. You literally could probably have 80,000 beans per acre up to infinity, but for sure up to 160, 180, and have 100% yield potential because the beans are able to compensate. They're able to branch out. Corn is not that way. You got one plant, one ear. So that's why 8 hours I'm comfortable at 75% out on a worst case scenario. And you're probably not going to have that, that worst case scenario. Okay. But with corn, it's somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. It just kind of depends on the environment. So anyway, with corn, we say 24 to 48 hours, 50 plus, but again, realistically, somewhere in the 40s, mid 40s ish range, and you'll still be okay.
Okay.
So, and then with beans, it's just 8 hours. So if it's gonna dip down into it with beans for me, again, because we've got that leeway. I'll plant beans in a lot colder than I will corn. Right. And beans are just pretty resistant to cold, and the risk reward there is so great by planting beans earlier because you hit the early flowering window, you're spending it on average an extra couple of weeks in the R2 stage, which is flowering up and down the plant, and on average, you're going to get 2 more additional pod producing nodes. Oh, that's where your extra yield comes from. It's nothing. There's nothing hard about it. It's very interesting science. The whole flowering earlier, that has been fairly recent on the discovery on that. So we're flowering on the front side of the summer solstice instead of the back like we used to. Yeah. And we started playing around with that because we've got good seed treatments and stuff. We've got resistant to brown stem rot. We have seed treatments for sudden death. So they started playing around with that, found that out, and it doesn't cost the farmer a dime. Wow. He just changes his practices, reaps about 8 to 10 bushel yield advantage on the right year, and it's just been a great practice that we've adopted, and farmers adopt practices so quickly. When they're discovered, you're looking at boom, that market just shifts.
You get out there, scout early, you'll dig up seeds, you'll look at roots, and this is just make notes, prepare for why things might turn out the way they do, right? Keep an eye on it.
Right.
Any particular pro tips to spot where there might be trouble? It sounds like it's where the obvious plant is behind something else, right? That's going to draw you to it.
Well, yeah, when you're out scouting, you're just keeping your eyes open and your mind open, and you're looking for damaged plants is what you're looking for. So whether that's wilted, whether it's discolored, and when I talk when we do training, with the DSMs or dealers, anybody, I always the thing that they probably get tired of hearing me saying is, don't ever go out into the field unarmed.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that, if you're when you see an above ground symptom on a plant, 9 times out of 10, you've got a problem underneath the ground. So you need to be able to dig that plant up and to be able to dig that entire root system up, or as much of it as you can get, depending on the time of the year. So, garden trowel, through the knee-high stage, you can get that plant out of the ground, and you know, a, a, a fertility-looking symptomology, striping on the corn leaves, or the edges that are, the leaf edges that are yellow and then turning brown, which is a potash deficiency. Uh, Purple plants, early on, which is a phosphorus deficiency. Um, a lot of times it's not that the soil's deficient, it's that the roots aren't growing well. So you need to dig it up and see, have I had injury from an insect? Do I have disease injury? Do I have compaction? A lot of times you just got compaction down there, and those roots aren't getting into a big enough area of the soil to take that in, or that soil up there where they're at might be dry, so they're just not able to take it in at the time. So, when you get above knee high, you need a full size daggone shovel or a spade, if you're going to try to dig up that whole root system. But yeah, you're just looking for symptomology out there of
It's
something that might be going on, and then figure it out so you can correct it. Now, what an example like with phosphorus. Phosphorus ties up pretty easy to the soil. It binds to metals in the soil, and your roots kind of got to grow to it a lot of times. So under cool, wet conditions early on, when the corn plant's small, those roots aren't getting out there and getting to the phosphorus. Once it warms up and the roots grow better, it always comes out of that. So there's nothing really to learn about that. Nothing that you can do to change that. Um, but if there is something you can change, if you've got issues with a lot of times you have issues with your residue there. You need to do a better job of managing it in the fall or the spring. So there's things that we can learn to hopefully improve on the next year's crop.
wow. So, as you talked about, this is why you're going to want to check for seedling diseases, and it's really about just staying on top of your operation and seeing if there's anything that you need to address differently next year. Whether it comes down to just circling back to that planning window or getting an answer to why things look that way.
Yep.
To dive into a little bit about those differences and what we're doing, and because we're finding, I honestly think 8 out of 10 farmers I'll ask, what was your seed treated with? They don't know.
Just know that it's treated.
They
It's
know
kind
it's
of
treated.
become table stakes now. Yeah.
It is.
And the Viantis is the perfect example. So we've been using it's been out on the market for, I think, 2, but maybe 3 years. And again, it's a Syngenta product. We treated all of our seed with that the first year it was out. Just added it to our package, no additional cost, because it is a Pythium specialist, and that is our number one soil-borne fungal disease on corn, maybe soybeans too, or at least on the right year. And so we have added it to our soybean mix this year for the first time too. Um, we're really excited about. I don't had many different names. The first name when we were looking at it in development was Timerium, but it's going to be it specifically went after a nematode product. This is Syngenta again, and but it also is going to have as good of SDS control as Saltro and Olivo. So you're gonna control soybean cyst nematode, still get your SDS, some help on some Septoria brown spots, frog eye leaf spot. Just going to be an amazing compound, and we're going to be offering that maybe next year. I'm not sure exactly what the registration is done, but that is something that we try to do. Is we try to make sure that our customers have the very best seed treatment, and when something better comes along, we're going to put that on immediately. And that's a difference. Your corporate companies are going to sell what they have in stock.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean that's just what they're going to do, plain and simple. I'm not blaming them for it. I'm just pointing that out that that's the way it is. Where we don't have that corporate tie, we're gonna, just like we do with our seed, we're gonna go out there and access what we believe is the best, and then no different than the tune-up plus pail. We've looked at all the studies. We chose a company that's good to work with. We think it's a fantastic product. So, you know, things we don't probably take credit for enough as an independent company that we're doing to look out for our customers, because we are a seed company only. We're not a corporation. We don't answer to shareholders. We do answer to ourselves.
Yeah.
It means doing the best job we can and also offering the best product we can for our customers, and hope that they understand and value supporting an independent, because it supports the true future, because we have competition and choice.
Oh man!
If it's just a seed it's just a corporate seed company world, you're not going to have that choice.
No,
it's going to go away.
It's going to go away.
It's going to be what they offer in their bag. And again, not to knock them, that's the model. That's the way they're set up.
Absolutely. And we partner with them, so like you say that, and that's why competition's beautiful. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you for listening and checking out this episode of the Cornelius Seed Podcast. We hope you have a wonderful and safe rest of your planting season, and until the next one.